Opinion Rockwall County Game Day, talking with Wes Tolleson, Texas Private School Media. I thought we would talk a little bit about the Dallas Christian Chargers and the road that they have ahead of them in the playoffs coming up. I saw the bracket, Wes, that you guys put out. I love it. It looks really clean. First off, thank you for joining me today.
Of course, man. Thank you for having me. I'm never going to turn down an opportunity to join and nerd out over brackets a little bit. Also, I have to give a big shout out to Walker. He's the guy that does a lot of our graphics and makes the brackets every year. And it's so, I don't know if you're like this, but especially it's why I like March Madness so much. Is just getting a physical copy of a bracket and planning out all the different scenarios. It makes me geek out a little bit. So it's fun, and hopefully we can look at a couple of different roads it's going to take for DC to get to state. Hopefully.
Anytime I can nerd out on some football brackets or any kind of brackets when it comes to sports, I'm all for it. I love doing it. Specifically, the Txps Division III playoff bracket. That's what we'll focus on with Dallas Christian in there. Obviously they just had an incredible season. They're looking for their third state championship in a row, and everything looks the part during the regular season. They've pretty much dominated teams. The second half of the season, especially after that loss, once they go on the road out to Louisiana. But since then, it's been this team just learning how to play together, and I'm really excited. As someone who covers Dallas Christian, no other private schools, you get to cover a lot of them, but I'm really excited to see how this pans out this year, and I think they have a great opportunity to three-peat. So, with that said, looking at this bracket, we start off with Fort Worth, Lake Country. Just kind of dive into that game real quick and tell us what you think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting to me, and I spoke about this, Walker and I did for a second on the last episode we recorded. We kind of took all of the D1 through D4 brackets and gave essentially our rapid fire thoughts. And Lake Country, man, has, after beating a Division II team, going up and beating a D2 team in Fort Worth Christian, an opponent that DC is very familiar with. That was an incredibly impressive win for them. And after that, they fell off a cliff. I mean, they got blown out by Michigan School of Dallas, which is pretty understandable. Then they got blown out by Trinity Christian out of Lubbock, Colleyville Covenant. They lost to Brazos Christian, a D4 team, and Grace Prep just absolutely wiped them. So they have the potential to be very good. I'm very high on their quarterback. I think his name is Gannon McElroy, something around there, but he's dynamic. He can run, he can throw. It's just going to be a matter of, is he going to have time to, with guys like Porter Nix bearing down on him, Chris Scott at linebacker, if he can get in there. It's going to be interesting. I'm trying to be careful what I say here because I don't want to come out and say, yeah, DC is absolutely going to win this game. But it would be a very big shock to me if DC doesn't come out and dominate. And this is something that we've been talking about on the podcast as a recent theme, is great teams don't just win the big games against good opponents. The mark of a great team is beating lesser opponents and dominating them as well. You can't
100%.
slip up, especially in the playoffs. You really just have to keep your nose to the grindstone and take care of teams you should take care of. And I think that's got to be kind of incorporated into the game plan this week for DC.
It always gets me. You bring up a great point. When these teams, when they blow out their opponents and they're like, well, yeah, but look who they played. I'm like, well, would you have said the same thing as if it was a closer game? If it was a 30-24 game, you would have been like, man, DC, they barely beat those guys. Like, they must not be very good. So you're absolutely correct. When you're the more dominant team, you should go out there and impose your will, and it should be no doubt, how good you are. When you're playing a lesser team. And I'm not saying Fort Worth Lake Country is. I don't know much about them, but you got to figure in the early rounds. Dallas Christian has to be favored by quite a bit going into as they move along in the bracket. When you look at this bracket overall, what kind of sticks out to you, especially on the Dallas Christian side, but as a whole?
Yeah, so there's one game in particular that I'm really looking at. There's two games I think will be competitive on in the first round, and that's going to be Dallas Covenant versus Covenant Christian out of Colleyville, which is going to have a direct impact on if DC wins the first round. They're going to play the winner of that game. These teams have matched up once already. Covenant Colleyville beat Dallas Covenant. I think it was 23-20. Yeah, it was 23-20 earlier in the season. Close game, really early in the season. You can't factor that in a whole lot this late. A lot of things have changed. Also, Dallas Covenant was tied 14-14 with Grace after the first quarter of this last week. Now, Grace ended up winning the game somewhere around 50-14 or 50-21. But that being said, is they can come out and play with and maybe stun higher quality teams initially. So that'll be something to watch if Dallas Covenant makes it to a matchup with DC. Also, the game I'm really interested in is Grace Prep versus Brook Hill. I think I've been a lot higher on Brook Hill than a lot of other people this year. Now, I know I'm already going to have some DC fans saying, well, we beat them by a billion points already. Yes, DC is also going to beat almost everyone in the division by that many. I think this game is going to be very interesting. I would take Brook Hill to win. I like their team a lot. They played with a lot more passion, it seems, this year. They've been a lot better. So that'll be interesting. And then, yeah, that's the main thing that sticks out on DC's side. Now, there's also a decent amount going on the other side, but DC won't face any of those teams until state, presuming they get there. But yeah, it's D3 is one of the more fun brackets to look at this
For
year.
for those that don't understand the buys and everything, can you tell me about Lubbock Christian and how do they get a buy? How does that work out?
Yeah, so as far as I'm aware, it's the size of the districts. It's
Okay,
not
okay,
DC obviously would be, the number one overall team if we were seeding it that way. However, it's just the size of the districts. I think that there's more it's either more or less teams. I'd have to go and look, but it's not at all based on merit. It's just kind of how things fall. It's one of those little quirks that Taps has that, it's and honestly, my thoughts on that are that might, we saw this a lot in the baseball playoffs being brought into discussion of how it might hurt teams to sit and maybe get rusty. Now, baseball is a very different sport from
right.
football. Football is a lot more physical, but I think it really could benefit DC to play a first round game and, kind of get the juices flowing, hopefully get the starters out at half against Lake Country. Again, not trying to jinx anything, but really kind of try and see how your November game plan executes practice. But that's just kind of my thoughts on the issue.
It worked out for the Texas Rangers, right? They didn't
It
get the bye.
absolutely did.
I see that. I see that. If you look at the other side of the bracket, and if you're just DC fans and you're kind of plotting along, and you're like, okay, who might we face up with on that side of the bracket? What stands out to you on that side, and who are a couple of teams that we should be looking at?
Absolutely. So there's going to be two teams that I'm going to mention. And if you're going to ask me point blank period, who is the team that DC is most likely going to if the state game comes to play, you know them, you love them, well, you might hate them. It's Cypress Christian.
Right.
It's the team that DC has known they are most likely to face all year. With Chris Hogan, the state championship coach at Grapevine Faith at the helm, who will be hungry to bring in a state title in D3 this year, and also it's the story of their team is the running back John Kelly. It's another name DC's familiar with. They've heard John Kelly, John Kelly, John Kelly all year. I'm sure they'll be very excited to get a chance to just like Marcus Ramon Edwards, the Tech commit from TCS Lubbock last year. All you heard was Marcus Ramon Edwards, Texas Tech commit, and DC came out and quite frankly stomped them.
Right.
They'll be eager to do that again this year. John Kelly might even be a better talent than the Marcus Ramon Edwards. Not as imposing physically, but dadgummit can that kid run. If anyone's watching this, you need to turn on the film and watch John Kelly. He's electric. He's a Power 5 caliber guy for a reason. But in my opinion, kind of scouting on Cypress, they've got a couple good linemen. They've got a good linebacker whose name escapes me. But really, it's kind of the John Kelly show, in my opinion. He's elite, but there's not a huge cohort of talent around him. Whereas I think that DC is a much deeper team. Now, granted, I say that, and Cypress is going to come out, and there's going to be four guys that have 3 touchdowns in their first round playoff game. But that being said, that's just kind of the way that I see it. Also, another team that's very interesting to me is San Antonio Holy Cross. We picked our Final Four and championship matchups in the podcast this past week. It took me about probably 30 seconds to just sit there and look. And that's a lot in podcast time. I'm saying it took me a long time to sit there and look and finally begrudgingly pick Cypress Christian over Holy Cross. Holy Cross is a great team. I think they have almost as good of a chance to make it to state and face DC if they make it that far as Cypress Christian. They're 8-2 on the year. They're 3-0 in district. They're outscoring their opponents by a DCS margin, 400 to 186 on the year. The thing that really popped out to me in their last game against a pretty good Geneva Bernie team, who's I think the 3 seed in that district or the 2 seed, they beat them 74-7. Holy Cross is good. I love their quarterback Gibby Alvarado a lot. They're just kind of, it's an underdog story. They're in San Antonio. They don't get talked about a whole lot. I know I've been talking for a long time, but long story short, on the other side in the South, it's going to be Holy Cross versus Cypress most likely for that state title game.
Yeah, and hey, we appreciate you. We're pro Dallas Christian, so if any other schools watching this, and it seems like he's favoring Dallas Christian on the side, it's because that's what we want to hear. That's what our viewers want to hear. So he's playing to the crowd, and we appreciate it. I know coaches don't like to do this, and even some fans don't like to do this. Parents don't like to do this. But let's compare. Let's take a look at this year's Dallas Christian team versus the most recent state champion last year's team. There any similarities? Is there anything that's like, man, this team just is a step, is a little bit better than last year, or there's an area where they're not as strong as they were last year in this area? Is there anything that pops out to you about this year's Chargers team?
So what I will say, and as I'll give you my knee-jerk gut reaction to this year's DC team. Whenever I watched their first action, or the first action I got to see was in that 3-way scrimmage between DC, All Saints, and Parish. And I was watching that scrimmage, and immediately I had 2 thoughts. Number one was, this is the most ferocious team out of the 3 that I see. There was like a discrepancy. The only big discrepancy that I saw was in the trenches, whereas that's a given, where All Saints and Parish are going to have a lot bigger guys. But in terms of pure ferocity, DC was different, man. The Crawl brothers, Porter Nicks, it was just people were flying around and knocking heads, and it's just kind of a DC staple of toughness, of grit. And you might be more talented than us, but we're going to outwork you, and it turned out really well. The other takeaway from that scrimmage for me was this could be the best team on the field, and they played to the level of both of those elite teams in Txps. And that's kind of what I've taken throughout the entirety of the season. In terms of similarities to last year, I think DC's always had a line of great running backs. That's been another staple for them. You trade out Zach Hernandez for Jaden Davis.
Yeah, Jaden Davis. Yeah.
Yeah, Jaden Davis, who's been fantastic. I got to watch a little bit of his coming out party against Bishop Lynch, which was fun. But it's honestly, there's not a lot of huge differences in my mind. I mean, there's not any drop off from athletes. There might be a slight step up, but nothing glaring. I think the biggest piece is Luke Carney taking another step forward. Every time that I watch Luke, his running has always been there and been very good. His passing has gotten much better. I watch him hit guys like Speedy, obviously Corey Taylor, and it's almost night and day from last year to this year. And he wasn't a bad passer last year. It just means he's that much better this year.
I think he just got a little. I think where he's improved in my mind is he's gone past just maybe looking for nettles, and he's seeing the entire field a lot better, and I think that's really helped out his passing.
It absolutely has. And that's just all that is mental reps and work in the off season and learning how to progress through more than one read. Not every play is, okay, where's Will? How long is it going to take for him to beat his man? Let's bomb it over there. Let's do it.
And Will's a good option.
Now you have exactly. No, that's always a great that play by itself probably has about an 80% success rate. Yeah. But then again, you can also now with smarter, better quarterback, you can go through that read, and if Will's not immediately available, you turn back to the other side of the field. Corey Taylor's burned his man, you throw it to him.
Yeah,
100%. So that's a big thing for me. Also, in the same vein, just having another year of Speedy being bigger, faster, stronger in his senior campaign is huge. Those are the main takeaways. It's not really the difference to me isn't the turnover of guys. It's the guys that they've had taking another step and being that much better.
Yeah. We're talking with Wes Tolleson, Texas Private School Media. He needs no introduction when he steps on the field. Everybody knows him. You guys do fantastic work. Where will you be this first round? Will you be out to any games?
So yes, sir. I will be on Friday. I will be at at a matchup of Legacy Christian Academy and Fort Worth Southwest Christian. I could also nerd out about the inner workings of Division Two, but I'll keep away from that because DC is not there anymore. Saturday, I might be at Bishop Lynch versus Central Catholic, but we will see. Also, I want people to know how much I love private school football because I am missing the Duke versus Arizona
Oh,
matchup on Friday to watch the game, which is killing me inside. But just know I love private school football that much. I will forgo Duke basketball.
everybody does. I'm sure everybody knows that. Hey, before we let you go, you have D1, D2, D3, D4. If Dallas Christian, if you're ranking them, I haven't seen your latest rankings, or if y'all put one out. Where do you put them against all divisions?
Again, so if we're power ranking all the divisions, I'm probably going to have Liberty Christian first, Parish, no, Episcopal out of Bel Air second, Parish third. DC is probably going to fall probably around fifth, with All Saints being fourth. With it's again, if you look at the teams above you, I
Yeah.
know I made a comment back in the day. If you don't rank DC number one in the solar system, you get just an outpouring of outrage.
I'm just
But
trying to fire
you
the
looking
people up right now. That's why I asked that
at
question.
I'm glad you did. You're a heck of a host. You know how to play the role. But yeah, I mean that being said, fifth in close contact with all those teams, it just means you're an elite standing.
Hey Wes, my man, you're a pro. I love, big fan of you and what you guys are doing over at Texas Private School Media. Thanks for the time today. Have fun this playoff season, and maybe I'll see you down the road.
Chris, I appreciate the opportunity to come on, and good luck to y'all. You're gonna have to let me know during the game how it's going.
I will do. All right, take care, buddy. Have a good one.
Appreciate you.